Optimal health for high performers. This is the Health Upgrade Podcast with Dr. Nawaz Habib.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Health Upgrade Podcast. This is Dr. Habib. We are in person, and this is always exciting for us to have a wonderful guest in person. We've got Ashley Koff with us. How are you?
Hi, great. Thank you.
So we're doing this makeshift, but we're doing it in a fun way, and we're going to talk today about your best shot and how GLP-1 medications and whether you're doing it shot or not can actually be really beneficial for a lot of our patients that are dealing with metabolic and health weight-based issues. So we're really excited to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah. And what's really exciting is the two of us actually at this presentation, at this show, are doing a presentation together. We're talking about the GLP-1 vagus nerve connection. This is a topic we've explored previously on the podcast, but we're really excited to hear about some of your specific recommendations, tools, and practices that people need to incorporate into their lives in order to boost up their GLP-1 activity. First off, the levels of GLP-1 that are present, but also how do we make sure that they're signaling it effectively? So let's talk first about your background, make sure everybody knows exactly who you are.
Okay.
Let's get into talking about Ashley.
Yeah. Ooh, one of my favorite topics. So let's go ahead and do it. So I was, this is a very personal journey for me. So I think I was actually just recently giving this conversation at a pediatrics conference. And I was like, this is so important for parents and kids. So, I think the discovery and understanding that we have a vagus nerve and then sort of the polyvagal theory, which I know your audience is aware of, I think that has done so much for us understanding this concept of weight health. But I think in order for us to get there in this conversation, let's unpack what weight health is. And for me, I have learned and have sort of coined the term weight health because of my lived experience. So growing up until about age 8, I was just this awesome kid. I would say that I was a cross between Shirley Temple and Spanky from The Little Rascals,
You
So
have the curls.
I got the curls. I got the curls going on, and I definitely had the attitude. And I really just saw life as, total possibility. I saw myself as very strong. I still to this day have a very strong sense of injustice. So I was sort of a defender of people who were picked on and just tried to have everyone feel very included. And I always had a belly, and I don't really think that I ever, thought it was an issue. I also always had ear infections and throat infections. And it was a time where the way you treated those was you just went on antibiotics. So I was on a ton of antibiotics. I think that that's like a really key thing. And those antibiotics were never deemed a health issue. They were just when you have an ear or throat infection, and, or even if the fact that you're having one like every quarter or every month or, et cetera, is just like, aren't we lucky that we have antibiotics? And around 8, something really shifted for me. I recall in about, I guess it was second grade, that this boy took me out back, and he was a bully. And, it's kind of this weird thing in school because a bully is also like super popular. So you kind of want to be friends with them. And there was another boy that I think he was bullying, and he's like trying to get that boy to kiss me. And I was like, I don't want that. I'm up against a wall. And I remember he punched me in the stomach, and he punched me a couple of times. And it was a really profound moment for me because, it's a traumatic moment. I want to be very clear, and we'll talk a little bit about trauma being trapped in the vagus nerve. But I think the big moment there was also that my belly was this weakness, that suddenly I wasn't just this strong, I can do anything anywhere in the world, but society now saw my belly as if you're going to attack me, attack my belly. And I think I went on a path of I have got to get rid of that belly. I've got to hide it. I've got to try to eat differently, exercise, try all the things that society says. And it really, not only did those things not work, my belly continued to grow. So one of the issues of weight-focused approaches and just weight-focused treatments is when they don't work, they often end up where you have more of the belly, more of the fat, more of the shame, more of the failure. And that proceeded for, about 20 years. And I went on a path where I tried healthy, quote unquote, things. I tried diet programs. I remember going to Weight Watchers, and you all line up, and at the front, you go in, and it's like you either get on the scale and they high five you, or they give you hugs, or you go sit down. It's very intense. So for me, it was always this space of weight versus health. I was never deemed to have a health issue. Even when I came back at age 19, and they're like, okay, it's time to get your tonsils out. The answer then was, we have a surgical solution. So it wasn't until a very weird, like total rock bottom moment for me, and I talk about in the book. I met a healer. She's diagnosed me with a worm. She's like, a goat's milk cleanse. I did 7 days of goat's milk only to try to lose this belly, and it's like, it sounds so crazy, but you're like, okay. So I try to lose the belly, doesn't work. I end up drunk at a bar and I meet a gastroenterologist. It's like the start of a joke. And the gastroenterologist, I ended up going to his office and he said to me, it's not what you're eating or not eating. It's that your body doesn't have, and in particular, your digestion doesn't have what it needs to run better. So that actually changed my entire life. That moment there, I became empowered. I learned that my body is not weight or health, that it was actually digestive health, that my digestive system, and at this point, I was really focused on my gut and what was in my gut, and thinking about how do I fix it. And so I went on to have a career where I helped people fix their gut. And as a result, they were getting healthy on that part. And I always noticed and was, people remarked on, and look at your skin and look at your mood and look at your, and these would be other people as well. And they were able to lose their weight. It wasn't until 2004 when I saw my first bariatric patient that somebody said, I noticed, I was like, a day later, their diabetes was literally gone, or a couple days later, their appetite and hunger was like suddenly regulated. And we thought we were, shrinking the size of the stomach was what was doing it. And somebody flippantly said to me, oh, this is the incretin hormones. I'm like, incretin hormones? And it turns out that these are weight health hormones. And I call them weight health hormones instead of incretin hormones. And they're in your digestive tract. So I was correct to be helping people optimize their health with their digestion. But when I learned about the weight health hormones, I realized we now had a way to bring weight and health together. And we have an approach, and this book is about, it's for everyone. Our body is an ecosystem. It is a weight health ecosystem. Your weight, not your total number, who cares about that number, but where your fat is, how much fat you have, your muscle, your bone, your blood sugar, your appetite, hunger, all that, it's all related. And these hormones actually regulate it. And that led me to the vagus nerve, because I learned that the vagus nerve is actually, it really, my initial learning until I talked to you and kind of learned about more was that it was how they got their signals. I didn't know as much about that's the transportation back. So thank you for the long way around to letting me introduce myself. But I think that's, it's really what I want people to take away is that our approach to weight, diet, and exercise, it does not actually, one of the main reasons it fails so badly is it doesn't actually belie an understanding of our physiology. And our physiology is this weight health ecosystem. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the whole idea here is that the approach that we've been taking for so long is not holistic.
Yeah.
We're lacking the idea of, like, if it's your weight, then it's your weight, and that's the thing that needs to be addressed, and that's it. We're not thinking about why it happened to that person in the first place. We're not looking at all the different sources where the root of this problem actually lay. And I love what you've kind of talked about here. You talked about where the fat is located. You talked about the microbiome playing a role, the gut health being kind of that big piece. And we can get into some of the factors that we can identify there. But so much of that comes from the psychology, the psychological aspect. The polyvagal theory brings this entire concept of the stress that we hold affecting negatively our vagus nerve, not allowing it to do the work of keeping us in a regulated rest, digest, and recover state, and shutting down that bidirectional communication between the brain and every area of our body and regulating the inflammatory process.
Yeah, and I'd like to put a pitch in for the mitochondria, because it does matter what you eat and it does matter what fuel you're giving your cells in order to generate the energy that they need to do all of the biochemical things that they're doing. So you can rely on glucose and sugars, or you can rely on ketones and fatty acids. And so what you want to eat, what you feel is going to satisfy you actually matters a lot in terms of how well your mitochondria and how your metabolism is going to function. So those same incretins are affecting what your taste buds are seeking, what you are looking for. Are you going to be grabbing that donut, or are you looking for that steak and eggs?
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I find so interesting too is we give a lot of credit for or we'll high five and be like, oh, that's a healthy food, right? Like, oh, that steak or egg is better than sugar, right? And then we have to come back and say, your body actually doesn't high five you until it gets to the cell. So I love that you brought it to the mitochondrial level, because one of the reasons I focus so much on digestion is that if you give credit, if you call kale or salmon a healthy food, and yes, there are things that are just blatantly unhealthy and they're really devoid of nutrients. If we just think of the body as an operating system, then something that doesn't give us nutrients or that gives us something that will irritate the body is going to be problematic. But let's just talk about, all food out there. If I was to go to my teacher and when I'm turning in the paper, be like, and I got an A, like, and telling them what the grade, the teacher would be like, I'm going to go read it. They go read it. They're like, you actually got a D. I'd like you to rewrite 4 paragraphs. And we're giving a lot of credit, especially in the protein conversation today, of like, just eat more protein or take in, I was listening to someone yesterday, have meat 3 times in the day. Okay, well, if somebody has meat 3 times in the day and after that first time in the day, their body still isn't digesting it, they're not breaking it down, the enzymes aren't working appropriately, the acids aren't working appropriately, maybe they're not even chewing, maybe they're so rushed and I say like those people, like I'm definitely like could do a better job of, sitting and chewing, et cetera. But, it has to go through a lot of phases too. And so the high five that we get is when the mitochondria, like when the cells actually get what it is they need, and they do so in a way that doesn't compromise other effects. So one of the really interesting things for me about this and looking at the whole weight health hormone ecosystem is that one of them, PYY, is actually helping to regulate hydration. And to tie that together for someone who's listening, I think many of us feel we could probably do better on hydration, right? And we've been teed up that hydration is about drinking more water. I'm the daughter of a urologist, and it was like, drink water, make sure your urine is clear. And what we don't emphasize, again, to your point about the mitochondria, is that one of water's jobs is to actually escort nutrients into the cells for the cells to be able to utilize it. And in order to do that, we need potassium, but we also, need those water soluble nutrients, and we need water, and we need a regulation of our electrolytes. So one of the things I do in the book to take what I think can be okay, so there's a chapter in there called Shit to Unlearn. I'm just going to drop it in there, right? I'm cursing right out the door. We have to unlearn the idea that it's not half your weight in water. It's not drink more water. It's not necessarily the type of water that you're having. It is the type if you're having a water that has sugars or artificial colors or, other things in there. But it's actually that we need to resource our body with water and make sure the water gets where it's going. So I call that being a hose or a sponge. I had a physician friend of mine say to me, it's a fun little way to think about it. And so then I gamified it, and you drink about 8 to 10 ounces of water, and then not right having had caffeine. You have to drink that. And then if you have to pee in sooner than about 2 hours, you're probably not hydrated, right? Well, why is that important? Why do I bring it back to weight health? Number one, the cells need that water and they need it to be metabolically active. But the second part is, if we are dehydrated, if the body senses that as our stool comes through, PYY's job in the colon is to actually scan our hydration and then pull water and electrolytes from the stool. So, and then the other side of it is, if our blood sugar is high, to your point about having more carbohydrates and not the right balance with proteins and fats, if our blood sugar is high, then the blood calls on the cells and says, give me your water because I don't want it to be sticky in here. So this is why it's so important for us to not look at any weight related solution, but instead look at any tool that we're going to use in the concept of weight health and understand how it's kind of this whole ecosystem, that's working together.
Yeah, I love that idea of and just coining of the term weight health.
Thank you.
Such a powerful way to really approach how we're viewing it as practitioners, as people that are dealing with these issues on our own. You mentioned PYY, and I want to get into this, and you've mentioned incretins. I don't think everybody realized. I think the popularity has gone to GLP-1, right? And by virtue of it being the single most marketed drug over the last 5 years, we know GLP-1. Let's talk about all of the incretin hormones and what their roles are in a brief area so that we can all understand what their biochemical function is.
Yeah, thank you. You did something for me that I try to always remember to do, which is like to make sure we're all using the same lexicon, right? As a dietitian for years, I've always, said to people, if you're a vegetarian, like, can you please define for me what that looks like? So it's like we can use these words. So incretin, at the time he was using it, the reference, so historically GLP-1 and GIP have been called incretin hormones. And the focus of them, a very myopic focus, has been on a hyper focus, has been on insulin and glucagon. So what these hormones do, these peptide hormones, so they're made from protein, from amino acids, they actually tell other hormones or neurotransmitters to go to work. So it's absolutely right. And the reason these medications were originally developed, or instead of medications, I like to call them biosimilar hormone replacement therapy, but we'll get into that in a second. But the reason they were developed was because we understood that GLP-1 and GIP, your own hormones that you make in the lining and they're deployed from the lining of your digestive tract, that they impact insulin and glucagon. So that they tell insulin to go to work, or they delay glucagon, or they may tell it to go to work, depending on what's needed. Why is that important? Because so much of our historic approach to blood sugar management and to blood sugar treatment and to things like diabetes, where we're looking at insulin, has just looked at insulin as the starting point and didn't realize that there were dominoes before it, on that piece. But there's these others, there's PYY, there's CCK, there's actually GLP-2, there's amylin. So there are many weight health hormones. And so we also need to understand that we're at the place, especially as we get into the agonist conversation, the replacement of kind of like when we thought that Lactobacillus acidophilus was the end-all be-all of probiotics, right? We then learned about bifidobacteria. We learned about streptococci. We've learned about Akkermansia. We've learned about all of these others, and they're an ecosystem and they all work together. So just, fixing one is going to be a factor. When I call them a biosimilar hormone replacement, what we want to understand there is we have bioidentical hormones, estrogen, insulin, thyroid, on that part. But what we don't want to think of is that these are just a medication. They're an agonist. They come in and they're actually replacing our own hormones. So they are similar to these hormones. But when they go in, they go right to receptor sites, right? And we now know, thanks to these medications, I love the medications. And everybody's like, oh, they're going to win the Nobel Prize for changing weight, and everything focuses on weight. I was like, no, they should win the Nobel Prize for teaching everyone how the body actually works. There are receptor sites in your brain. There are receptor sites, as you mentioned, on the taste buds. There are receptor sites on the endothelial, on the tissue, the lining of the blood vessels, on the heart muscle. I think we're probably going to find receptor sites on the liver and on the thyroid and other organs if they haven't, already. And so when you take a replacement and it goes to these receptor sites, what's so incredible about it is it's all of a sudden it's activated. But it's activated, here's the dissimilarity. It's activated for a much longer time period than our own. So our own hormones stay on 2 to 5 minutes. And these, when you take a medication, and the initial one was 24 hours, and now it's 24 times 7. We're going to get into that because that's the key to me with the vagus nerve, I believe, and some others, on that part. But the other piece of it is it's totally circumventing your entire system. The vagus nerve does not have to stimulate the gut and the L cells, K cells to release these. They don't have to be released. They don't have to travel by way of the vagus nerve or the bloodstream to get where they're supposed to go. So what happens over time to a system that the body has that doesn't need to be used? And I think that's a really interesting question when we're looking at microbiome changes, signaling, when we're seeing what somebody might call as a side effect of dehydration of being on the medication. Is it a side effect, or is PYY confused because its friends, GLP-1 and GIP, don't need to actually go to work in the gut? And so maybe it's slowing down. Maybe it's not it thought it had a snow day. It's like, I'm not going to show up for work, on that part. So we'll talk more about it. But I was curious what thought it triggered for you.
Yeah, it was about the microbiome, and wanted to just get a sense from you as to, we know different foods will affect what bugs in your gut are surviving and are thriving. And that can change really what vitamins your body's getting, what minerals, what fats are being absorbed, et cetera. How do drugs like GLP-1, which are going to necessarily alter the natural response of the gut to food, how does it affect the microbiome?
Yeah. Oh, I love this question. I have to say, I'm probably at about 30 to 40 podcasts in a recent span. You are the first person that said just necessarily, this is a direct effect of the medication. One of the things I think we have to do is debunk this idea of what's being called side effects. This is when a medication works exactly how it's supposed to work. It's like somebody called, they were like, oh, lower testosterone might be a side effect of of a statin. I was like, no, that's a direct effect. Like that is when you interfere with cholesterol formation, you interfere with what's available for testosterone or CoQ10, whatever. We're all head nodding and sharing microphones. So, it's like we're triple stamping on that. So I think that the first thing that anyone needs to understand is that if you have underlying suboptimal digestive function, we are all sitting here in a random room in Vegas, having traveled, like I've been to 3 different cities before here. You came over, there's no way, like even anything that I am trying to do to optimize my digestion, there's no way it is optimal in this moment. So I just want to acknowledge when I say if you have, it's kind of like if you have stress in your life. All right. But if you have any suboptimal digestive function before using an agonist, this hormone replacement therapy, it will exacerbate that because dissimilarity of this biosimilar hormone replacement therapy is instead of 2 to 5 minutes of activity, it's a week, right? So think of if you have a motion detector that's a light outside of your home and somebody walks by it and it goes on and off. Maybe that happens 5 times in the day, right? 6 times if there's a dog. So you're like, okay, my electrical bill is going to be 6 times 2 to 5 minutes. So let's call it 30 minutes. Now let's say I leave town and I forget and I leave the light on and I come back a week later. My electrical bill is going to be very different. The electrical bill of our body and of our gut health when we delay something for that long time is going to be a factor. So we'll get to the vagus nerve part, but on the microbiome, we have to understand that when we delay gastric emptying for that amount of time, even at the lowest dose, which people call microdosing now, but low dose or a true microdose, we're going to see a delay in gastric emptying. When there's that is a part of the system of our whole digestive tract. When you are seeing that delay, that is going to change how something is broken down, when it gets where it's supposed to go. If it has too much, like say you're trying to meet your protein needs and you have too much protein, we were all at a talk last night and you might end up with your body with undigested protein going into the colon, which is where it's not supposed to be, and we'll see critters there. One of the things, if I go to the other direction that it's also impacting, and I love that you said this, is your receptor sites on your tongue are actually getting satisfied and they're getting satisfied for a week. So you may actually change what you're eating or you may not eat for a period of time. You might think I need to get more fiber in. If you go and take more fiber, especially at the start of being on the agonist, you may actually get so uncomfortable because of the delay of motility that you can't move your bowels and then stop taking that fiber or, try these other things. So the alterations in your eating is absolutely going to alter your microbiome. What's happening in your mouth is going to affect your oral microbiome. That's going to affect your taste buds. I mean, it's all throughout the digestive system. So we are not looking enough at the potential alterations in microbiome. I can say maybe they instead of we, because my approach is to use gut health testing very strategically. I'm not using it to be like, you need this supplement, this supplement, this supplement. I'm using it to get a landscape of your gut as you go on the medication. And then probably on a quarterly basis, unless there's something else going on, I'm using it to see what are we doing to your gut. This is a part of it being me wanting to have it be a weight health solution and not a weight solution. If it's a weight solution, you can get skinny and you can still have a microbiome that is more hospitable to cancer or to other diseases and, inflammation and autoimmune and that kind of thing. So I think that we really have to look at the microbiome. I want to acknowledge a pro of the medication, however, does appear to be that there are some favorable responses in the microbiome. And there's the question that I have in my head that there's no research to answer this is they're a part of giving a very overwhelmed and frustrated system some time off because the receptor site are satisfied and we don't have to sort of drum up the whole system. But also one of the things that is, and this is the shot or not part, one of the things we all have to look at for better digestion is when you give your body less at one time, but it's a better amount, a better balance and better quality, then the body uses it and is then able to go into rest and digest on that part. So, and we'll talk about rest and digest in a moment, but that's like, there's so much to the microbiome in this conversation.
Absolutely. But I wanted to take it one step further and talk, since we're at the A4M meeting, which is the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, a lot of biohackers here. And one of the popular things that people like to do is to either intermittent fast, I'm an intermittent faster, as well as longer fasts. And the challenge that anybody who's ever tried to fast for several days undergoes is there's a period at which you're really hungry. You really want to eat. You do get past that, but that's a big barrier to most people doing this. These drugs do suppress your hunger urge, so they can be an assist in doing a longer fast. Now, the reason why people like to fast is because it triggers autophagy. And so you end up at some period of time, some period of hours after you've last had a meal, if it's a long enough period of time, your cells will begin that spring cleaning, getting rid of broken proteins and organelles and other things. But the amount of time that it takes to get there can vary based on how your metabolism is functioning and how well your digestive system is moving. If you are slowing down the transit of food through the system, does that alter how quickly you can get into that autophagy state? And do you think that it's a tool that people should use in order to get a longer fast or get into a fast more comfortably?
Yeah, fasting is one of those. I think I left out of my introduction of myself, which was so long. How did I leave something out? But I left out that I worked in advertising and I sold sugared cereals. So my first job out of college was at an ad agency. I sold hair color and some other things. So there's a lot of marketing, and I think fasting has the worst marketing. It's one of those things that I think we really like. It is so bad. It's kind of also like I have a lot of people today who tell me they don't have breakfast, and I was like, so you understand that the word? I'm a little snarky. I'm like, you understand the word is break the fast. So if you are eating at any point, you're breaking the fast. If you just not be having it, thank you to my cereal commercials, you might not be having a complete breakfast and doing that at, whatever, 8:00 in the morning. I think that many people aren't actually doing fasting for autophagy. I love that you sort of elevate knowledge and belief in what people's choices are. And maybe that's like in a special like community that you're a part of, like in that space. Most people are fasting because most of their approaches to diet for weight loss specifically are not working. And they have read books or seen articles and been like, if I can shorten or go longer without eating, and if I can muscle down, if I can create a muscle that literally doesn't exist in the body called willpower, if I can create that muscle and build that muscle and and I'm trying to find a way to pass by like the 27,000 different places that are, offering me food and, all these other messages, if I can just power down and not eat, I'm going to get to a better weight. And maybe some people are also thinking, my digestive system bothers me all the time. And so if I just don't put anything into my body, then my digestion won't have a problem. And we are seeing this so much, especially for women, but also for men. But as hormones exit or as they as they significantly shift, how problematic fasting done inappropriately actually is. And so one of the things about fasting is what we're actually talking about is a caloric window versus a recovery window. And the body has a lot of things to do during a recovery window. So fasting is a modern day answer to the fact that we used to only have food available when the sun was up and we really only consumed it when we were active. It was like, okay, I'm going to eat something before I go outside and fight for my life or build a home or, try to whatever I'm doing on that part. And then by the end of the day, it was like, you came in to have some nutrition for some recovery purposes.
And we didn't have refrigerators.
I mean,
so it wasn't like you woke up in the morning and went to the refrigerator.
That's
grabbed the orange juice.
And we also didn't have food that is not really food that is designed to stay shelf stable and available for us, and be packaged and at any point in time, and also manufactured to be so delicious that it to be so the nutrient composition to override our satiety mechanism. So when we look at that, I understand why this conversation around fasting is so popular today, but we do have to acknowledge, and I particularly think, and when we get to the microbiome and we get to signaling and we get to how do we optimize an operating system and recognize the weight health ecosystem, trying to operate for too long without any nutrition depending on how you're asking the body to operate is going to be a problem. So I would much rather that somebody wakes up and has nutrition from the time that they're waking up and being active and then stops when they're about to no longer be active. So what I mean by that is a caloric window that maybe you start within 1 to 2 hours of being awake and then ends at say 5 or 6 p.m. But nobody likes that. Like literally no one wants that. What we want to be told is Like, I don't need to eat breakfast. I could have coffee and there's all these fasting like hacks. Like I can put some stuff in my coffee or, I can have a bunch of supplements to give me nutrients with coffee. Like, I mean, it just doesn't, it's so problematic for the system. And what ends up happening is we end up with people with jacked up hormones and like things like cortisol, et cetera. And their vagus nerves are so unhappy. They're, suboptimally resourced. And, there's that whole piece. Now, I want to acknowledge before I want to give you the floor, Navaz, this is not me saying don't do fasting for autophagy. This is me saying that there is this brilliant concept of fasting for autophagy. It also is something that says if you're going to do fasting, why not have that be the time where you also go to bed earlier, or you also shift what you're asking of your body and brain psychologically, or you don't stay up. I once did Prolon during the March Madness. What was I thinking? Like, because I stay up to watch basketball like all the day, and I'm like cheering and like whatever. And I was so hungry. It was the worst Prolon I'd ever done. And it was great for me to psychologically remember, like, I mean, I'm sixth man. Like, I am in there, I'm screaming, I'm like jumping up and down. It wasn't a workout. It was that emotionally my body was like, you are asking so much of me. Like, instead, I'm not saying you have to like lie in bed and just breathe, but I do think that we have to look at fasting as not just I'm like, this is the thing that I'm doing so that I'm not taking in calories so that my waistline shrinks. This is something that I am truly leaning into to give my body some extra aid for recovery.
So on this subject, because there's a lot of discussion out there as to whether or not the food that you eat today is actually giving you energy and giving you nutrients for today. And I think there's a lot of evidence. In fact, probably the most remarkable example of this is there's an individual who happens to be a carnivore and he's into fasting. He went and ran 7 marathons in a row while fasting for that week. And he showed that the energy that his body was using had nothing to do with what he was eating. Now, that's a function of a guy who is he's in ketogenesis. He's relying on ketones being generated from his liver. So he's not burning the food that he ate today. He's burning food he ate a month ago.
The mechanisms have also been trained up in somebody like that, right?
Yeah.
The biochemical mechanisms of
Flexible mitochondria.
understanding fasting, having the flexibility to do that is a function of why that was capable of happening. I think in the general population, and I agree with you, we're not eating for today, but when we have a lack of efficiency, that's when we are, right? And so we have to build it out. And to your point, fasting has a couple of things that need to happen around it. Number one, it needs to be set up for success. You can't do Prolon during March Madness. You cannot do. One of my health coach actually was house sitting a house for 5 days, and she did a Prolon fast while she was house sitting so that she wouldn't go to the pantry and planned it. So she did it in a way that would actually be really beneficial for her to do that. You can set yourself up for success in planning and creating these confident mechanisms of this is how I'm going to do it.
I did it before a colonoscopy and that was brilliant.
Yes.
So I love like planning. Yeah, totally. Because that other stuff is nasty. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Exactly. So planning it out and having that preparation piece is huge. And then the second thing is from a clinician standpoint, there is not a one size fits all approach. And I think that's what's so important to note is we have these ideas of intermittent fasting being 16-8 and everybody should be doing it. Or we have this, 72-hour fast, let's do that, or whatever it is. These are concepts, these are tools. Each one of them is a tool. They're a starting point, and they're not something that can be prescribed across the board to everybody, right? Even just as simple as a carnivore diet or as a Mediterranean diet or as a vegetarian diet, it can't be for everyone. Everyone has to figure out, based on what they want their output to be, how to piece together all of the tools to create their own toolbox. And then it even changes through their age, through their lifespan. So we have to create an approach that is flexible from a practitioner standpoint, not dogmatic. And I think that is an important way to kind of approach how we go forward.
I'm so grateful that you said that. And I absolutely love and respect my MD, my doctor colleagues, or DRs. And I'll use the DR on the doctor because My 5-year-old nephew calls me a backwards doctor because I'm an RD. And I was like, you know what? I'm leaning into that. I am backwards. I'm the only one that could have written this book because this is a book for that. It is a playbook for how to personalize using all of the tools that are available. So you just summed it up perfectly. And I think that's so important. And that's not the wheelhouse of physicians. And it doesn't mean that physicians don't agree with or don't want a person to have a personalized and aren't personalizing, but they're diagnosing and coming up with recommendations and then suggesting different tools. One of the reasons that I want, whether it's from the book or whether you're working with a dietitian, whether you're working a health coach, a CNS, a sort of like all the different practitioners out there. And I think as chiropractors and naturopaths, so many of my colleagues have learned how to do personalization in a different way. And as a nutrition specialist, my job is to come in and say, all right, let me look at your total nutrition. And to your point, one of the things I think that really helps an individual, like the gentleman that you were talking about, is his approach to his total nutrition. So it's his food, it's his supplements, it's what medications he isn't on or what medications he is on. Really looking at like, how am I going to resource my body effectively today and tomorrow, right? And one of the things that's happening with GLP-1 agonists, or that's happening in a weight-only conversation, is that someone is going on and they're supposing that a tool is a solution. And so it's, if I go on this, will this do this for me? And the answer is no, because there are pros and considerations. It may do this. You may lose weight, or you may lower inflammation, or you may have like all of these wonderful benefits. It is also going to do these things. So one of the things we haven't talked about that, it's crazy because it's totally your wheelhouse is, and I talk about you so much in this book because it was so great to be able to have a conversation about very early on in this. I think you and I, when we first met, and I was like in this mode, and I'm like, we have got to talk about that. The fatigue that is being associated with these medications is being called a side effect, and where people are being told it's a side effect of those people now not eating enough. And yes, if you are under resourcing your body, fatigue can be an issue. But and if your sleep before wasn't better, that we may have a factor. But what's happening here is, let's go back to that electrical bill. Your body is in a metabolically active state for a week instead of going into these moments of I'm metabolically active and now I'm in rest and digest. So one of the things I find so profound and what was so helpful about the vagus nerve work is, and I think you had shared with me that, it's not that when somebody is deciding to use this medication as a tool, they are actually acknowledging, and certainly if they have any benefit from it, they're acknowledging that there was some suboptimal function in that part, right? And we see that all the time. And one of those things that has been suboptimally functioning is their vagus nerve. So when you then go on a medication that then says like, okay, I'm going to keep you in metabolic activity, we see heart rate variability, and we don't just see it go down a little bit, right? We see it go down significantly. I have people who have crippling fatigue, and they're trying to treat the fatigue with caffeine, or they're trying to treat the fatigue with, what supplement can I take? And we may use supplements. We may even use, caffeine. We may use changing the way you eat. In fact, I'm going to use all of those things. We will definitely use a lower dose of the medication, or we may not use the medication. We may use, say, like Americate, Calocarb, because it's going to be done in your body in 8 hours. So there are a variety of things, but I think the hit that this medication, so not only is there an acknowledgement of suboptimal, what do you say there, 5 types of safety for the vagus nerve. Let's talk about that. There, not only do we know there's some suboptimization for most of us in those 5 areas, but now this medication, like we talked about with the microbiome, is going to have a direct effect there.
Yeah. What you're referring to is all the different sources of safety. So we're looking at the different realms. Emotional safety, day to day. Do I feel safe where I am? Is my environment safe? How are things going there? Psychological safety. What happened in my past that might be drawing up emotions and driving through a polyvagal lens me into a sympathetic state and not allowing vagus nerve to do its work? Physical safety. Do I feel physically safe in my environment? Am I at the top of a hill and I'm worried about falling down? Do I have a fear of heights? What are my emotional fears that I'm afraid of from a physical standpoint? Or if there's actually like, if you're unfortunately stuck in a situation where you've been in a car accident, there's been physical trauma, and now every time you get in a car, there's these emotions that are drawn up. And then the last one here is biochemical safety. And biochemical safety for me is at the cellular level and at the mitochondrial level. Do we have the nutrients available to do the job that needs to be done? And do we not have toxins present? Do we not have oxidative stress and inflammation and toxins that are all around us present that are knocking down the function of the
Mm-hmm.
cell at the biochemical level? So those are the safety areas that you're talking about. And I agree very much. We want to create an overall holistic sense of safety in each of those realms in order for us to turn on vagus nerve signaling. And then when we have that good vagus nerve signaling, what that means is it's almost like we have a good, strong, thick electrical wire. But what's happened for a lot of people is a rat's come by and nibbled on the wire, and people have been rolling up the wire and it's all bent and frayed and it's not as strong as it can be. So I want to think of boosting vagal tone through this feeling of safety as increasing the insulation around the wire so that the wire can fire more effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what you're trying to get to there.
Yeah, and the reason that I wrote this book is I was like, hey, from a playbook standpoint, if you're going to use, I think it's an incredible tool. If we're going to use semaglutide, tirzepatide, I will say this, and I know there's retatrutide that's now coming out, on that part, and some really wonderful data. I wish that the data wasn't always about like, yay, we have faster, more weight loss. It's like, let's look underneath. It's like, let's look at. I mean, there's osteoarthritis, and there was the liver fat results from retatrutide look amazing. So I think there's great stuff. There are medications that are then coming out that are small molecule non-peptide. Those are not going to be a part of this conversation. Like that's a different set of functions and a different way. So I want us to be clear about that. But for our conversation, if we're using these tools and understanding them as a biosimilar hormone replacement therapy, we could have all this going on. But when you're on the medication, and when many people have expressed a desire to come off of it or a need to come off of it, finances or access or other issues, I don't want to make a goalpost of a medication coming off the medication. I think that belies a weight bias because we don't say that about like statins or others, et cetera. But I think in that piece, when we're looking at this, we have to understand that one of the things that's happening is if this medication works for you the way that you want it to work, you are shrinking fat cells and you are, as a result, liberating toxins. And when those toxins are being liberated, you just hit on something. It's then further creating a problem with that fifth area that you were just talking about, that biochemical safety. And it's not just the biochemical safety of the vagus nerve, it's the detoxification system being overwhelmed. Somebody was just asking me the other day what I thought about HRT and weight health hormone replacement therapy. And they're like, we've seen that you have they both work so synergistically, you have a much better result from both of them. I love that. Like that is absolutely true because again, it tells us how our body works. Like your sex hormones are completely related to your weight health hormones. When you are losing or when you're having shifts in your sex hormones, it's going to throw those weight health hormones and your digestion, overall off. But when you are the body is done with a sex hormone, it needs to be detoxified and it needs resources in your detoxification system in that liver to be able to break it down and convert it into a form where it can be eliminated. When we're shrinking fat cells, we're also having toxins just like those sex hormones that are going to be needing to be broken down and converted. So this whole process, I think this is where the rubber meets the road. This whole process creates a unique challenge. We need to be more optimally, if there is even such a term, but we definitely need to be optimally resourced for the body to have everything it needs in order for this tool to not have negative consequences. And then to your point, it's a tool that people could be using to actually consume less. So that's a dance that to optimally resource when your body now wants to be consuming less is really, I do think that's why, you need the tools that I've got in the book for the quick hacks, the easy way to do this, but also probably a practitioner that's going to go on that journey, with you. Yeah.
So let's actually step into the world of the healthcare provider who's diagnosing and prescribing this medication. Because as has come out in the MAHA movement, there are almost no instructions given to most physicians and healthcare providers with respect to diet. And frankly, I think there's a bias in the healthcare industry against people and patients having the willpower or the knowledge to eat properly. And I think there's a lot of people out there when they get prescribed these drugs for weight loss, They just assume that they're going to eat less, but they don't change what they're eating. So, with your experience and your knowledge and your expertise, just give our audience a sense as to how you should change your diet. What are the ideal foods to be eating to provide yourselves with the right nutrients, to provide them with the right tools to maintain themselves in a healthy way while going through this process if they're interested in losing significant weight, for example?
And I want to double click on the myth of the non-compliant patient, which exists across the board. I often will just say to my colleagues, dietitian, like whoever I'm teaching, because I teach a lot of different types of practitioners. If your patient isn't able to move forward, if they're not able to do something, then that doesn't what they've identified as a hurdle or what doesn't work for them. If you sit back and smugly say, well, they're just not compliant, that's a you thing, on that part. So the question mark is, we really design it as a series of experiments to see what is actually doable and then how the body responds. And that's our job as curious practitioners who partner, with a patient. So I think that's key. The other one, I think what you're speaking about is there's a very big difference between teaching someone nutrition, education, being able to pass a test, knowing things, and being able to practice nutrition and practice optimizing nutrition. There are so many practitioners today, whether self-taught or starting to learn in schools, because there are amazing programs, who know about nutrition. They might be like, oh, this is better, or this, hey, this is a good idea, et cetera. They can't actually practice nutrition. I had to learn to practice both in school and then to actually go into practicing nutrition. And I think that that's it. We have to recognize, that's different. And the third piece to that, to then get to answering your actual question, is that we really have to recognize that for any of us, practitioner or not, knowing anything about nutrition does not make us healthier. We have to have insights about our unique body. So we need to know either, from a genetic standpoint, hey, your methylation, like there's inefficiencies or there's efficiencies that are there. We might need to up you on choline and zinc. Choline and zinc we can increase through food and supplementation. Let's look at what's available to you. Let's look at what's delicious to you, because deliciousness actually matters for our satiety responses and our weight health hormones. And then let's actually look at what you are going to do. And that's going to help guide me to a total nutrition plan, food and supplements. So to answer your very specific question, I think there are three things to consider. Number one is food and supplements don't belong in two different spaces. Supplements should be used to prevent or address existing gaps. And there are some supplements that can be used for therapeutic purposes. So I might decide to try plant sterols or something like that instead of a statin. I might try to use something therapeutically there, right? And I might at the same time say, I'm not able to consume enough magnesium throughout my day for my body to have the magnesium at the end of the day that it needs to support my recovery window. So I'm going to take a magnesium supplement before bed. So the people that are out there are plenty of them. My colleagues, is a little bit of a moment, who attack me for using supplements will come in and I'm like, this is so dumb. Like, we are looking at the body as an operating system and we're just figuring out how to meet the nutritional needs there in a total nutrition capacity. The second one should have been the first one. Your nutrition has to get where it's supposed to go. So the crust of your pizza, I use a pizza analogy in my book, is going to be your digestion. We've talked about that plenty, digestion and hydration. So your total nutrition is going to be the result of what your digestion can actually, deliver to the cells. How do we make those choices? Years ago, I was in DC. I was trying to change nutrition at the national level. Like, I was MAHA before there was MAHA. Like, I don't consider myself MAHA now, but I was doing it, and I saw every wall that came up, around me. The only wall that didn't come up was I had so many clients who were congressional representatives, and I was helping all of them optimize their health. And then when they came for my healthcare, I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be okay with, this on this part. But what's so interesting about the problems that we have in this space is that there isn't actually a definition of optimal nutrition. I found there wasn't a definition of better nutrition. We have things like DRIs, dietary reference intakes. I call them I reference the RDAs, the recommended daily allowances of old. So every package has, what percentage of, on that part. They are really dumb amounts. They are, if you look at the magnesium one, it still is from 1997. We're in a different century. It's for a 135-pound woman and a 166-pound man. And it supposes that men, based on weight, actually need 20% more magnesium than women. If you've ever had a uterine contraction, or just a headache, or just a bad day as a woman, I'm not looking for women to get more rights than men. I'm just saying it would be nice if we could be equal on our magnesium needs, And 400 is so suboptimal. It's, if you say say we have 10 units is our body's need for magnesium. If we only consume 4 of those units, then we don't get to say, hey, could you do me a favor and use some of that today to allow my digestive muscle to relax so I can poop? The body's going to go, no, I'm just using it to pump your heart. I don't care if you don't sleep well at night. I don't care if you have muscle cramps, et cetera. So when we consistently suboptimally resource our body, so one of the things to recognize as you're trying to choose your nutrition and look at your total nutrition is we actually need more resources. And every message around weight is about weight loss and is about eat less, right? So the diet message is totally wrong. It's you should be eating more nutrients. So one of the other things that you have to look at from a tip standpoint is fortification of food, and things like enriched flour are highly problematic. So you are very likely, when you're eating packaged foods, eating foods that have ingredients in there that are synthetic and are set amounts and may not even be what the ingredient is that in that food found in nature. Like orange juice don't have a high amount of calcium, on that part. So one of the other things to look at when you're looking at your total nutrition is what is in my protein powder? What's in the bar? Where are these nutrients? And maybe I could clean that up and get rid of the fortification and then figure out my supplementation and my food. The definition of better nutrition is giving your body what it needs today. So it's personalized and it's time-stamped while avoiding, reducing what can irritate, overwhelm, and disrupt its efforts. What can disrupt its efforts is too much at one time. So the quantity matters. What can disrupt its efforts is instead of frying an egg on a cast iron circle pan or circle frying pan, you use a paper plate on a gas stove. So just because something looks like a circle doesn't mean it's the tool you should use. So red dye is different than lycopene. Lycopene gives the body something. Red dye might irritate it, but it also doesn't give it, something on that part. So quality, quantity, balance of nutrients. If you don't want any carbohydrates, don't get in carbohydrates, but recognize carbohydrates are a vehicle for a ton of different nutrients, fiber, magnesium, B vitamins. So then where are you going to get those nutrients? And you have to be, strategic about it. If you're only having plants and you don't want to have animal, great. Just look at what you're not getting in. And then we have to make sure that we're getting it in at an optimal level. So balance is going to matter. And we've already double and triple clicked on timing, our caloric window, and also our frequency within that window. So what I do in the book is I actually give you lots of different assessments and quizzes so that you can actually see where am I under-resourcing my body. And I think that's going to be the key piece. Yeah.
What you're doing is you're providing a tool to help with validation.
Right.
And I think for people to understand what's actually happening within their body is the starting point. Just like a GPS, like we all have Google Maps on our phone. You want to know where you're going, you have to put 2 pieces of information in. Put in the address that you want to go to, but Google Maps needs to know where you're starting from first. You need to know where you are beginning. And so that validation piece is huge for people to understand. Here's where I stand. What do I need to do on my own path to make this work? And I always go back to this quote because it was just so profound to me, but it was in The Matrix when Neo and Morpheus were speaking, and Morpheus said to Neo, he said, one day, sooner or later, you're going to realize there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. When you know something, that's great, but that's not the full battle. You have to actually walk it. And there's a difference there. And when you walk that path, because you figured out exactly what those specific things are, that it's not calories in, calories out, and that's the end of the story, that it's not about cutting off your intake at a certain time, right? There are tools that we know that are better for some people than others, but we need to uniquely for each individual walk down that path. That for me is the key to creating weight health. I want to start to wrap it up, but
Yeah,
GP,
so
go
I was
for
just
it.
going
Yeah.
to say, actually, you have all of this knowledge, and there are people out there who have the knowledge. How can you help them walk the path? How can people get in touch with you? How do they get to learn more about you?
Yeah, so my book is called Your Best Shot. It's the personalized system. So it is a system for optimizing weight health, GLP-1 shot or not. I think it's wherever books are sold. So you can find that. You can look for me and you guys will link that. But in social media, I love to hear from you. My company is the Better Nutrition Program. If you're looking for clinicians, coaches, we also have, if you're a practitioner, we have a GLP-1 optimization certification to learn how to do this side of it, to do the nutrition, to do the shot or not, how do we optimize weight health? And I think one of the really key pieces that's unique about my book, and the reason I call it a system, is there's a QR code in there. So even if you are getting this book at the library, which I love libraries, you can use the QR code. You can click on the QR code. You come into a HIPAA compliant, so a private as we can make it, practice management tool, and we connect you for free with a coach. And the coach there is someone that you can ask them questions so that they can help you navigate places where you may be going, like either not picking up on some of the signals that your body is sending, or where there are resources. Like everyone will say to me, well, I read that part about the vagus nerve. Like, which tool do you use? What do you do? And I was like, and there, boom, is my friend, Nawaz Habib's, there's his book, there's his program. One of my favorite things about you is for many of my patients, you've had taken time with them like for free. I mean, it's just been amazing. And so I think the ability to connect to the right resources is one of the things that I wanted to make sure I made available in this book as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the information is out there, but if you don't have that
How do we
unique
walk?
person
Yeah.
to walk down that path, to help you hold your hand down that path and have that approach provided, it becomes very difficult. So that's why it's such a great resource. I'm going to definitely be digging through my copy when I get it, and I'm really excited for everybody to learn more about Your Best Shot and learn more about the Better Nutrition Program. So thank you so much for joining us today. This was wonderful.
Thank you both. And doing it in person is just extra special. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.